On the rugged shores of the west, where the great hills plunged their ancient feet into the restless sea, a humble goatherd named Gorla and his wife Ira made their home in a weathered cottage of stone and driftwood. The winds howled ceaselessly from the ocean, carrying the salt spray that crusted the rocks and the distant cries of seabirds wheeling overhead. The family, 3 sturdy sons and 1 graceful daughter, named Lyra, lived in a rhythm as steady as the tides. By day, the young men, Arden the eldest, Bren the middle, and young Finn, ventured out in their weathered boat to fish the churning waters, or hunted in the shadowed glens for deer and hare. Lyra, with her hair the color of sunlit wheat and eyes like the deep sea pools, tended the kids on the misty mountainsides, her voice singing soft herding songs that echoed among the crags, or remained at home with her mother, mending nets by the flickering hearth, or churning butter in the cool shade of the cottage. For several peaceful years, harmony wrapped the family like a warm cloak. The cottage rang with laughter during evening meals, where stories of the day's catch mingled with tales of old heroes whispered by the fire's glow. The sea provided bountifully, the hills offered game, and the goats' milk flowed rich and sweet. But one fateful day, as Lyra wandered the hillside with the frisking kids, the sky darkened unnaturally. The sun, once a blazing orb, dimmed as if veiled by an unseen hand, and a biting cold seeped into the air. A thick white mist rose from the sea, creeping like ghostly fingers up the slopes, swallowing the landscape in its clammy embrace. Lyra shivered violently, her breath clouding before her. "Come, little ones," she tried to call to the kids, her voice trembling, but the words caught in her throat, strangled by an invisible force. Strong, unseen arms seemed to bind her, pulling her into the fog's heart. She struggled, her heart pounding like waves against the cliffs, but the mist closed in, and silence fell. Back at the hut by the sea, where the waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, and the scent of brine hung heavy, anguish descended as the hours ticked by without Lyra's return. The family paced the narrow room, the fire crackling anxiously in the hearth. She should be home by now, Ira murmured, her hands wringing the hem of her apron, her face pale in the dim light filtering through the small window. Gorla stood at the door, peering into the gathering darkness, his brow furrowed like the furrowed sea. "The mist is thick tonight, thicker than I've ever seen," he said, his voice rough with worry. The brothers jumped at every sound, the bleat of a returning kid, the rustle of wind in the thatch, rushing to fling open the door, hearts leaping with hope. "Lyra, is that you?" Ardan would call, his strong frame silhouetted against the night, but only the cold fog answered, swirling mockingly. One by one, the kids straggled home, their small hooves pattering on the path, their eyes wide with confusion. At each bleat, someone hurried to let them in, Ira's hands trembling as she stroked their soft heads. "Where is she?" Bren whispered, his voice breaking the heavy silence. Finn, the youngest, clung to his mother's skirts, tears streaking his cheeks. "Sister promised to bring me a flower from the hilltop," he sobbed. Through the long night, no one slept. The family huddled by the dying fire, the wind moaning like a mourner outside. Gorla stared into the flames, his mind racing with fears of sea spirits or mountain wraiths. "We must search at dawn," he declared, but the mist clung stubbornly, blinding them even to the river's gleam or the mountain's outline. When morning finally broke, the mist rolled back like a retreating tide, revealing the hills bathed in pale light. The family scoured the land and sea, climbing the crags where Lyra had pastured the kids, combing the beaches where shells crunched underfoot, calling her name until their voices grew hoarse. "Lyra! Lyra, where are you?" echoed across the waves, but no trace emerged, no footprint in the damp earth, no scrap of her cloak on a thornbush, nothing but the empty vastness mocking their grief. A year and a day slipped by in this shadow of loss. Gorla and Ira aged visibly, their hair whitening like sea foam, their steps slower on the pebbled path to the shore. The sons fished and hunted with heavy hearts, their laughter rare, their eyes often turning to the hills where Lyra had vanished. "She was the light of our home," Bren said one evening, mending a net by the fire, his fingers fumbling. Finn nodded silently, carving a small wooden goat in her memory. At length, Ardan, the eldest, with his broad shoulders and resolute gaze, stood and spoke, his voice firm amid the crackling flames. "It has been a year and a day since our sister was stolen from us. We have waited in sorrow and patience, hoping for her return. But surely some evil has claimed her, or she would have sent a sign, a shell from the sea, a flower from the hill, to ease our hearts. I vow this, my eyes shall know no sleep until I find her, living or dead." Gorla looked up from the hearth, his eyes weary but proud. "If you have vowed, my son, then you must honor it, but it would have been wiser to seek your father's counsel first. The paths beyond our shores are treacherous, full of whispers and shadows." Ira, tears glistening in her eyes, rose slowly. "Yet a vow is a vow. I will bake you a cake for the journey. Who knows how far it may lead, or how long the road?" She kneaded the dough with loving hands, the scent of fresh bread filling the cottage, and baked not one but 2 cakes, a large one, golden and hearty, and a small one, modest, but warm. "Choose wisely, Ardan," she said, her voice trembling as she presented them on the wooden table, the firelight dancing on their crusts. "Will you take the little cake with your mother's blessing, a token of love to guard you? Or the big one, without it, since you set aside your father's leave and bound yourself with this vow?" Ardan paused, his hand hovering, hunger and resolve warring in his eyes. The family watched in silence, the seas murmur a distant lullaby. "I will take the large cake," he declared at last, his tone defiant yet tinged with regret. "For what use is a blessing if I perish from hunger on the way? Strength I need more than words." Ira's face fell, a shadow crossing her features, but she said nothing, only pressing the cake into his hands. Gorla clasped his son's shoulder. "Go with care, Ardan. The world is wide and wild beyond our hills." The brothers embraced him fiercely, Bren whispering, "Bring her back, or news of her," and Finn clinging longer, murmuring, "Don't leave us too." As dawn painted the sky rose, Ardan strode forth, the large cake in his satchel, letting neither hill nor river bar his path. He walked swiftly, his boots crunching on gravel paths that wound upward into mist-shrouded peaks, then down into valleys, where wildflowers nodded in the breeze. The wind whipped his cloak, carrying the tang of pine and heather. Eagles soared overhead, their cries sharp in the thin air, while gulls wheeled from coastal cliffs he left behind. He outpaced the deer in the glens, their antlers flashing as they bounded away. But as the sun climbed high, hunger gnawed at him like a beast. Trembling with weariness, he sank onto a moss-covered rock by a babbling stream, the water's song, a faint comfort. He broke off a piece of the cake, its crumbs falling like golden rain. "Spare a morsel, Ardan, son of Gorla," croaked a raven, its black wings folding as it landed nearby, its beady eyes fixed on the food. Ardan startled, his hand pausing midway to his mouth. "Begone, bearer of ill tidings," he replied sharply, his voice echoing off the rocks. "I have little enough for myself on this endless road." The raven cocked its head, cawing once before flapping away into the blue. Ardan ate quickly, then rose, his muscles aching but his will unbroken. On he pressed as the day waned, the little birds fluttering to their nests in the thickening twilight, the sky bleeding from gold to indigo. Darkness cloaked the earth, stars pricking the velvet above, until at last a beam of warm light pierced the gloom, a lamp from a distant house. Ardan hastened toward it, his heart lifting at the promise of shelter. The door creaked open at his knock, revealing a spacious room lit by a roaring fire, its flames casting dancing shadows on walls hung with woven tapestries. An old man lay on a bench, his beard white as surf, his eyes keen despite his frailty. Opposite him sat a maiden, her golden hair cascading like sunlight as she combed it with a silver comb, each stroke a whisper of luxury in the rustic space. "Welcome, fair youth," the old man said, turning his head with a smile that crinkled his weathered face. "Come, sit by the fire and warm your bones. Tell me of the world beyond, the winds, the seas, the folk. It has been long since these old eyes beheld it." Ardan stepped in, the heat enveloping him like an embrace, thawing his chilled fingers. "My thanks, good sir," he replied, settling on a stool, the scent of wood smoke mingling with herbs drying by the hearth. "I seek service to sustain me on my quest. I have journeyed far since sunrise, and your lamp's ray was a beacon in the night." The old man nodded thoughtfully. "Service, you say? I have need of a herder for my 3 dun cows. Hornless they are, grazing the wild meadows. If you can return them to me each evening before the sun dips low, for a full year, I will reward you with payment to gladden your soul, gold perhaps, or secrets of the hills." But the maiden looked up sharply, her comb pausing mid-stroke, her blue eyes flashing with warning. "Heed him not, stranger," she said urgently, her voice clear as a mountain stream. "Ill fortune follows those who accept his bargain. Turn away while you may." Arden bristled, his pride stung in the warm glow. "Unsought counsel is worthless," he retorted rudely, his gaze fixed on the old man. "What task is this that I cannot master? To drive 3 cows to pasture and guard them from wolves descending the mountains? Nay, good father, I will take your service at first light, and claim no wage until the year turns anew." The fire crackled as if in agreement, but the maiden's sigh hung heavy in the air, unseen omens stirring in the shadows. The dawn broke over the western shores, where the hills stood like silent sentinels with their roots in the sea, their peaks wreathed in mist. The air was crisp with the tang of salt and the faint sweetness of heather, and the waves crashed rhythmically against the cliffs, a ceaseless song that filled the goatherd's cottage. Before the deer's bell echoed through the fern-clad slopes, the golden-haired maiden, her silver comb tucked into her apron, had already milked the 3 dun cows, their breath steaming in the chill morning air. She led them to the front of the cottage, where the old man leaned on his staff, his eyes sharp as flint, and Ardan, son of Gawler, stood ready, his cloak pulled tight against the breeze. The old man's voice was low, resonant as the sea itself. "Let the cows wander as they will, Ardan," he said, his gaze fixed on the youth. "They know the fields of sweet grass, the paths through the hills. Your task is to follow, always behind, and let neither sight nor sound lure you from their side. Heed my words, for peril lies in straying. Now go, and may wisdom guide your steps." Arden nodded, his heart light with the ease of the task. "A simple charge," he replied, his voice bold. "I'll keep them safe, and by year's end, I'll have coin enough to seek my sister across the wide world." He glanced at the maiden, who stood silently, her eyes clouded with unspoken warning, but he dismissed her with a shrug. "No need for your frowns, lass. I've herded goats since I could walk. 3 cows will be no trouble." The old man raised a hand, touching the forehead of the led cow, her hide the color of storm clouds. She stepped forward, her hooves soft on the dew-kissed grass, the other 2 falling in beside her, their movements synchronized as if bound by an unseen thread. Ardan followed, his boots crunching on the path that wound upward into the hills. The air was alive with the hum of bees and the distant cry of a gull, the landscape unfolding in rolling meadows and rocky outcrops. In his mind Ardan saw Lyra's face, her laughter echoing from childhood, and he vowed to find her, living or dead, with the wealth this task would bring. As the sun climbed, painting the hills gold, Arden's eyes caught a flash of brilliance ahead. A golden cock and a silver hen, their feathers gleaming like polished metal, darting swiftly through the grass. Their beauty dazzled him, and the old man's warning slipped from his mind like water through fingers. "What creatures are these?" he murmured, his voice hushed with wonder. "Surely they're worth more than a year's wages." He gave chase, his heart pounding, his boots slipping on the damp earth. The birds were tantalizingly close, their tails almost within grasp, but each time he lunged, his fingers closed on empty air. "Come back, you glittering rogues," he shouted, his breath ragged, as he stumbled over roots and stones. The chase led him through thickets and over streams, the cows forgotten in his fervor. At last, exhausted, his chest heaving, Arden stopped, his knees trembling. The cock and hen vanished into the underbrush, their mocking clucks fading. Panic seized him as he realized his error. "The cows!" he gasped, turning back, his eyes scanning the meadow. To his relief they grazed nearby, their heads bowed to the lush grass, untroubled by his absence. "Thank the heavens," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. He sank beneath a gnarled oak, its branches heavy with acorns, to catch his breath. No sooner had he settled than a new marvel caught his eye. 2 staffs, one gold, one silver, twisting and doubling in the grass like living things. They danced across the meadow, their movements hypnotic, glinting in the sunlight. "What sorcery is this?" Arden whispered, his curiosity reignited. Forgetting his charge, he sprang up, chasing the staffs as they wove through the field. "I'll have you yet," he called, his voice echoing off the hills. They seemed always just within reach, but each grasp met only air. His legs burned, his breath came in gasps, and at last he collapsed, trembling with fatigue. A tree laden with strange vibrant fruits, red, gold and violet, stood nearby, its branches bowing under their weight. Hunger clawed at him, and he plucked the fruits, devouring them greedily, their juice, sweet and tart on his tongue. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows, and the cows, as if sensing the hour, turned their faces homeward. Arden followed, his steps heavy, his heart uneasy. At the cottage, the maiden awaited by the stable, her face stern as she began to milk. Arden watched, expecting the rich flow of milk, but a thin stream of water filled her pail, shimmering oddly in the fading light. The old man appeared at the stable door, his staff tapping the ground, his eyes blazing with reproach. "Faithless one," he thundered, his voice shaking the air like a storm. "You betrayed your trust on the very first day. You let your eyes and heart stray, chasing vanities instead of guarding my cows. Your reward comes now, that others may learn from your folly." He raised his wand, its tip glowing faintly, and touched Arden's chest. In an instant, the youth's form hardened, his flesh turning to cold stone, a pillar standing sentinel on the hill behind the cottage. Back by the sea, Gawler and Era's grief deepened, their hearts now heavy with the loss of both daughter and eldest son. The cottage seemed emptier, the fire's warmth unable to dispel the chill of absence. The waves crashed mournfully, and the kids bleated, as if sensing the family's sorrow. 2 years and 2 days after Lyra's vanishing, Ruais, the second son, stood tall, his dark eyes resolute. "Time drags without my sister and Arden," he said, his voice steady in the firelit room. "I have vowed to seek them, wherever they may be." Gawler sighed, his hands trembling as he gripped his staff. "Better you had sought our blessing first, my son, but a vow is sacred, you must go." Era, her face etched with new lines, rose to bake 2 cakes, one large and one small, as she had for Arden. "Choose, Ruais," she said, her voice soft with pain. "The small cake with your mother's blessing, or the large one without, since you vowed without our leave." Ruais, like his brother, chose the large cake, his hunger outweighing sentiment. "I'll need strength for the road," he said, his tone firm. "Blessings won't fill my belly." He set forth, his path mirroring Arden's, his steps swift through hills and valleys. Like Arden, he chased the golden cock and silver hen, pursued the dancing staffs, and ate the strange fruits, heedless of warnings. At day's end, he too stood before the old man, his failure sealed with a touch of the wand, his form now a second stone pillar beside his brother's, a warning etched in the hillside. Another year and a day passed, the sea's song a constant lament for the family by the shore. Covan, the brown-haired, youngest of Gawler's sons, stood before his parents, his eyes bright with determination. 3 years since Lyra vanished, and my brothers are lost, no one knows where, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of loss. I am all that remains of us 4. I long to find them, and I beg you, do not hinder me. Gawler's eyes softened, though sorrow lingered. Go, Covan, and take our blessing, he said, his voice thick. Era nodded, her hands trembling as she baked 2 cakes, one large, one small. Choose, my son, she said, presenting them by the hearth, the firelight casting shadows on her weary face. Covan, his heart warm with love, chose the small cake. Your blessing is worth more than bread, he said, embracing her, In the wood, hunger gnawed at him, and he sat to eat, the small cake crumbling in his hands. A raven croaked from a branch above, its feathers black as midnight. "A bit for me, Covan," it cried, its voice sharp. Covan smiled, breaking off a piece. "Here, friend," he said, stretching it upward. "May it bring you strength as it does me." The raven snatched it, gulping it greedily, then flapped away, its caw echoing through the trees. Covan pressed on, the forest darkening as night approached, until a beam of light from the old man's cottage pierced the gloom. "Work, perhaps, and coin to aid my quest," he thought, his heart lifting. "Who knows how far my sister and brothers have wandered?" He knocked, the door creaking open, and stepped into the warmth, ready to face whatever lay within. The cottage door stood ajar, a beacon of warm light spilling into the night, where the wind howled like a restless spirit, and the distant sea roared its endless lament. Covan the brown-haired stepped inside, his cloak damp from the forest's dew, his small cake tucked safely in his satchel. The air was thick with the scent of burning pine and dried herbs, the fire casting flickering shadows across walls, adorned with faded tapestries of woven wool. The old man lay on his bench, his white beard curling like sea foam, his eyes glinting with a knowing spark. Across from him, the golden-haired maiden sat, her silver comb gliding through her tresses, each stroke catching the firelight, like a stream of molten gold. "Welcome, wanderer," the old man said, his voice warm yet edged with mystery, as if he knew secrets the hills themselves whispered. "Warm yourself by my hearth and share your tale. What brings a youth so far from the sea's edge?" Covan bowed, his brown hair falling across his eyes. "I am Covan, son of Gawler, seeking my lost sister and brothers. I've walked since dawn, and your light was a comfort in the dark. I'd take any work to earn coin for my quest. Tell me, good sir, have you a task for me?" The old man nodded, his fingers tracing the knots of his staff. "I have 3 dun cows, hornless and gentle, that need herding. If you can bring them back each evening before the sun sets, for a year's span, I'll pay you a sum to gladden your heart, enough to seek your kin across the wide world." The maiden's comb paused, her eyes flashing with urgency. "Beware, young Covan," she said, her voice clear and sharp, cutting through the room's warmth. "His offer is a snare. Others have tried and failed, their fate sealed in these hills. Turn back while you can." Covan met her gaze, his expression softening with gratitude. "I thank you for your warning, kind lady," he replied, his tone courteous, unlike his brother's brash dismissals. "But my heart is set on finding my family, and no task is too great if it brings me closer to them. I'll heed your words and tread carefully." To the old man he added, "I'll take your service, and I'll keep faith with your cows." The old man's smile was enigmatic, his eyes searching Covan's face. "So be it. At dawn, follow the cows, and let neither sight nor sound sway you from their path. Wisdom be your guide." At first light, as the sky blushed pink over the hills, Covan set out, the 3 dun cows ambling before him, their hooves soft on the dew-laden grass. The air was alive, with the chatter of waking birds, and the distant crash of waves against the shore. The path wound through meadows dotted with wildflowers, their petals trembling in the breeze, and up rocky slopes where heather bloomed in purple waves. Covan kept his eyes on the cows, their dun hides blending with the earth, his heart steeled against distraction. As the sun climbed, a flash of brilliance caught his eye. A golden cock and silver hen, their feathers gleaming like treasure, darting across the path. They were closer than they'd been to his brothers, their tails almost brushing his fingers. "By the sea, what beauty!" Covan breathed, his hand twitching toward them. His heart raced, urging him to chase, but the old man's warning echoed in his mind. Look neither to the right nor to the left. With a deep breath, he turned his gaze away, fixing it on the cows, swaying tails. "No tricks for me today," he muttered, his voice firm. Further on the earth seemed to pulse, and 2 staffs, one gold, one silver, sprang from the ground, twisting and doubling in a mesmerizing dance. They glinted in the sunlight, beckoning him closer. "What sorcery is this?" Covan whispered, his feet itching to pursue. But he clenched his fists, recalling the maiden's warning, and kept his eyes on the cows, their steady pace a lifeline. "I'll not be swayed," he said, his voice a quiet vow. The path led to a tree heavy with strange fruits, red as blood, gold as the sun, violet as twilight, their scent sweet and intoxicating. One brushed his lips, tempting him to taste, but Covan pushed it aside, his jaw set. "My task is the cows, not these lures," he declared, pressing on, his boots crunching on the rocky trail. The cows wandered farther than ever before, their path leading to a moor where heather blazed in fierce flames, the air shimmering with heat and the crackle of burning stems. The cows plunged through without hesitation, their hooves kicking up sparks. Covan followed, his heart pounding, the fire's heat searing his skin. "Stay true, Covan," he told himself, shielding his face as he stepped through the flames, emerging singed, but unharmed. Beyond the moor lay a foaming river, its waters churning white over jagged rocks. The cows waded in, the current swirling above their flanks, and Covan plunged after, the icy water biting his legs, rising to his waist. "I'll not lose you," he shouted, his voice nearly drowned by the roar. On the far bank a wide plain stretched, its grass lush and green, and the cows lay down to rest, their sides heaving. Covan stood, dripping, his breath ragged, and surveyed the land. Nearby a house of yellow stone gleamed, its windows glowing with soft light. From within came sweet songs, their melody weaving through the air like a spell, lifting his heart. As he listened, a youth sprinted toward him, his face flushed, his breath coming in gasps. "Covan the brown-haired!" he cried, stumbling to a halt. "Your cows are in the corn, trampling the stalks. Hurry, drive them out before they ruin the crop." Covan smiled, unshaken, his eyes on the cows grazing peacefully nearby. "Nay, friend," he said, his voice calm. "It would have been easier for you to shoe them yourself than to run all this way to tell me. My place is here, with my charge." He turned back to the music, letting its notes wash over him. Moments later, the same youth returned, panting harder, his eyes wide with urgency. "Out upon you, Covan son of Gawler," he shouted. "You stand there, lost in song, while our dogs chase your cows across the fields. Go, drive them off." Covan's smile widened, his stance unyielding. "Nay then," he replied, his tone steady as the earth. "Calling off your dogs would have been simpler than racing here to scold me. I'll not leave my cows." He stood firm, the music swelling around him until it faded, leaving only the rustle of wind in the grass. When he turned, the cows rose, their eyes calm, and began their journey home, taking a new path across a barren plain, where rocks jutted like broken teeth. The ground was so bare a pin would have shone like a star, yet Covan's eyes widened at the sight of a foal, and its mother grazing there, their bodies plump as if fed on the richest meadows. "How do you thrive in such desolation?" he murmured, shaking his head. Further on they crossed a lush plain, its grass thick and verdant. Yet another foal and mare fed there, their ribs stark against their sides. "And you? Starving in plenty?" Covan wondered aloud, his brow furrowed. The path led to a lake, its surface silver under the fading sun, where two boats floated. One brimmed with laughing youths, their faces bright as they sailed toward a golden horizon, the land of the sun. The other carried grim figures cloaked in black, their boat drifting toward a shadowed shore, the land of night. "What mysteries are these?" Covan whispered, his voice lost in the wind. "What do they mean for my quest?" Darkness fell, the wind rising to a howl, and torrents of rain lashed the plain, turning the earth to mud. Covan could no longer see his cows, their forms swallowed by the storm. His heart sank, fear clawing at him. "Have I failed after all?" he said, his voice trembling as he stood, unable to move forward or back, the rain stinging his face. A great paw rested gently on his shoulder, and a deep voice rumbled, warm as a hearth. "Fear not, Covan son of Gawler, my cave is near." It was the dog of Maelmore, a legendary beast whose tales Covan had heard by his father's fire, massive, with fur like midnight, and eyes that glowed like embers. "Come shelter with me. You'll sup on lamb's flesh, and shed 3/3 of your weariness." Covan followed, the rain slicking his hair, into a cave where the air was dry and warm, scented with earth and roasted meat. A fire crackled, its light dancing on the walls, and the dog of Malmor set a platter of tender lamb before him. Covan ate heartily, the warmth spreading through his bones, and slept deeply on a bed of soft moss. At dawn he rose, renewed, his spirit strong. "Farewell, Covan," the dog said, his voice a low growl of kindness. "You took my hospitality and did not mock me, unlike others. When danger stalks you, wish for me, and I'll come." With that he vanished into the forest, his form blending with the shadows. Covan stepped out, the morning light soft and golden, and found his cows waiting in a hollow, their eyes calm. At his approach, they moved onward, Covan following steadfastly, his gaze never straying from their path. All day they walked, the hills giving way to a barren plain, where rocks offered scant shelter. Night fell, the stars cold above, and Covan stood vigilant, his heart set on the year ahead, and the hope of finding his lost kin. The night was deep and starless, the wind howling across the barren plain, where Covan the brown-haired stood with the 3 dun cows. The air was heavy, with the scent of damp earth, and the faint tang of heather, the rocks around them offering scant shelter from the biting cold. "We must rest here as best we can," Covan said to the cows, his voice steady despite his weariness. The cows, their dun hides blending with the shadows, bowed their heads, and settled in a hollow, their breaths steaming in the chill air. Covan wrapped his cloak tighter, the small cake long gone, and sat against a jagged boulder, his limbs aching from the day's long march. A flutter of wings broke the silence, and the black raven of Corrinan Craig alighted before him, its eyes glinting like polished jet, never closing, its feathers dark as the night itself. "Covan, son of Gorla," it croaked, its voice sharp yet kind. "I know a cranny in yonder rock, filled with food aplenty and soft moss for a bed. Come with me, and you shall shed 3/3 of your weariness." Covan's heart lifted, the memory of the raven's greed for his cake now a bond of trust. "Lead on, friend," he said, rising stiffly. "I'm weary to my bones, and a meal would do me good." The raven flapped ahead, its wings tireless, guiding him to a narrow crevice where the rock parted like a secret door. Inside, the air was warm, scented with dried berries and roasted nuts piled in a corner. A bed of moss, soft as a mother's embrace, beckoned, and Covan ate heartily, the flavors bursting on his tongue. He slept deeply, the raven perched watchfully nearby, and woke at dawn refreshed, the plain bathed in soft light. "Farewell, Covan," the raven cawed, its wings spreading as it prepared to depart. "You trusted my offer, as you shared your bread with me. If danger stalks you, wish for me, and I'll not fail." With a final cry, it soared into the sky, vanishing among the clouds. Covan found the cows waiting, their eyes calm, ready to continue. "Onward then," he said, his voice firm, and they set out, their hooves steady on the rocky path. All day they walked, the landscape shifting from barren plains to the banks of a river, its waters glinting silver under the sinking sun. The air was alive with the hum of insects and the distant call of a loon, the river's edge fringed with reeds that swayed like dancers. "We can go no further tonight," Covan told the cows, who began to graze on the lush grass by the stream, their jaws working rhythmically. Hunger gnawed at Covan, his limbs weak from the journey, and he longed for a morsel to ease his empty stomach. A swish of water sounded at his feet, and the head of Dorandon, the famed otter of the stream, emerged, its whiskers glistening, its eyes bright as river pebbles. "Trust me, Covan," it said, its voice smooth as the current. "I'll find you warmth, shelter, and fish in plenty." Covan nodded, his trust unshaken. "I'm grateful, Dorandon. Lead the way." The otter dove, its sleek form slicing the water, and Covan followed along the bank to a cave, where the tide had carved a hollow in the rock. Inside, a bed of dried seaweed, soft and briny, awaited, and a pile of fresh fish gleamed in the dim light. Covan ate, the fish sweet and tender, and slept soundly, the river's song, a lullaby. At sunrise he rose, his strength renewed, and turned to the otter. "You've my thanks," he said, his voice warm. "Your kindness has made this night bearable." Dorandon's eyes twinkled. "You took what I offered without scorn, Covan. You've made me your friend. If you face a river to cross, or a wave to dive beneath, call my name, and I'll come." With a flick of its tail, it plunged into the stream, vanishing in a ripple. The cows stood ready, grazing in the same spot, and Covan followed them back to the cottage as night fell, the sky a tapestry of stars. The old man stood at the stable door, his face alight with joy as the cows entered, their hooves echoing on the stone floor. The golden-haired maiden, her silver comb tucked into her hair, milked them, and rich creamy milk flowed into her pail, its scent filling the air. "You have done well, Covan, son of Gawler," the old man said, his voice resonant with approval. "What reward would you claim?" Covan stood tall, his brown hair catching the firelight. "I seek no gold for myself," he said, his tone earnest. "My sister and brothers, Lyra, Ardan, and Ruai, have been lost to us these 3 years. You know the lore of fairies and witches, old father. Tell me where they are, and how I may bring them back to life." The old man's face grew grave, his eyes shadowed. "I know where they dwell," he said, his voice low, "and it's true they may yet live again, but the perils are great, too great perhaps for any man to overcome." Covan's jaw set, his eyes unwavering. "Tell me what I must do," he said. "Let me judge if the task is beyond me." The old man leaned on his staff, the fire crackling behind him. "Listen well then. In the mountain yonder roams a roe, white of foot, with horns branching like a deer's antlers. On the lake to the land of the sun floats a duck, its body green, its neck gold. In the pool of Coribui swims a salmon, its skin silver, its gills red as blood. Bring them all to my cottage, and I'll reveal where your kin dwell." Covan nodded, his heart steady. "Tomorrow at cockcrow, I'll set out," he declared, his voice ringing with resolve. At dawn, the sky clear, and the hills sharp against the horizon, Covan strode toward the mountain, its peaks wreathed in mist. The air was crisp, scented with pine and the faint musk of wild beasts. High on a crag, he spotted the roe, its white feet flashing, its spotted sides gleaming in the early light. "There you are," he whispered, his breath clouding as he climbed, his boots slipping on loose shale. But as he reached the peak, the roe bounded to another, always just out of reach. Covan pursued, his legs burning, his hope waning with each elusive leap. "How will I ever catch her?" he muttered, his voice heavy with frustration. The thought of the dog of Mal Moor sparked in his mind. "Oh, that he was here!" he cried, and as he looked up, the great beast appeared, its fur dark as night, its eyes glowing with loyalty. "Why did you summon me, Covan?" it asked, its voice a deep rumble. Covan pointed to the roe, now a distant speck on a far peak. "The old man bids me bring that roe, but she outruns me at every turn. Can you help?" The dog's eyes gleamed. "Fear nothing, I'll catch her for you." With a bound it raced across the slopes, its massive paws silent on the stone. In moments it returned, the roe unharmed at its side, its white feet still, its antlers catching the sun. "What now?" the dog asked. Covan knelt, his hand resting on the roe's flank. "The old man needs her, and a duck with a golden neck, and a salmon with silver sides. Take her to the back of the cottage and tether her so she cannot flee. I'll seek the others." The dog nodded, leading the roe away, its form vanishing into the mist. Covan turned, his heart buoyed by the first victory, and set his sights on the Lake of the Sun, the next step in his quest to reclaim his lost kin. The dog of Mal Moor's deep growl echoed through the misty hills, his massive form disappearing with the roe tethered securely behind the old man's cottage. Covan the brown-haired turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the lake that led to the land of the sun shimmered like a sheet of molten gold. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of water lilies, and the faint hum of dragonflies skimming the surface. The path to the lake wound through meadows ablaze with wildflowers, their petals nodding in the breeze, and Covan's heart quickened with purpose. "The duck with the green body and golden neck awaits," he murmured, his boots crunching on the gravel path. "I'll not falter now." At the lake's edge, the water sparkled under the midday sun, its surface dotted with lilies that bloomed in creamy whites and soft pinks. Among them swam the duck, its body a vibrant green that gleamed like emeralds, its neck a band of gold catching every ray of light. "Surely I can catch him," Covan said, his voice brimming with confidence. "I've swum the rivers of my father's shore since I was a boy." He waded in, the cool water lapping at his knees, then his waist, his strokes strong and sure, but the duck was swifter, darting through the lilies with a grace that mocked his efforts. Each time Covan's fingers brushed its feathers, it slipped away, a golden flash vanishing beneath the surface. His arms grew heavy, his breath ragged, and at last, he dragged himself to the shore, his clothes dripping, his chest heaving. "By the sea, this duck is no ordinary creature," he panted, collapsing onto the grassy bank, the scent of earth and water filling his lungs. Despair crept in, but the memory of the raven's aid sparked hope. "Oh, that the black raven of Corinan Krieg were here," he called, his voice echoing across the lake. A flutter of wings answered, and the raven alighted on his shoulder, its feathers dark as midnight, its eyes sharp with knowing. "What troubles you, Covan, son of Gorla?" it croaked, its beak tilting curiously. "Why do you summon me?" Covan pointed to the duck, now preening among the lilies. "That green duck with the golden neck. I must catch it for the old man, but it outswims me. Can you help?" The raven's eyes glinted. "Fear not. My wings are swift, my beak sure." It launched into the air, its wings slicing the breeze, and swooped low over the lake. With a deft snap of its beak, it seized the duck, its green feathers fluttering, and returned, laying the bird gently at Covan's feet. "Your prize," it said, folding its wings. Covan knelt, stroking the duck's soft feathers, its golden neck warm under his touch. "My thanks, friend," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "You've saved me once more." The raven cawed softly and took flight, vanishing into the azure sky. With the duck tucked under his arm, Covan set out for the pool of Coribui, the final leg of his task. The path wound through a shadowed glen, where ancient oaks draped with moss loomed like silent guardians, their roots twisting into the earth. The air grew cooler, scented with damp stone and the faint musk of fish. At the pool, the water was deep and dark, its surface rippling under a canopy of overhanging willows. Beneath a jutting rock lay the salmon, its silver sides shimmering like moonlight, its red gills pulsing faintly. "Surely I, a fisher's son, can catch this one," Covan said, his voice steady as he surveyed the pool. From a nearby bush he cut a slender pole, its wood smooth and green, and fastened a line from his satchel, knotting it with practiced hands. "I've hauled nets heavy with fish since childhood. This will be no different." He cast the line with skill, the bait dancing on the water's surface, but the salmon ignored it, its silver form gliding lazily beneath the rock. Again and again he cast, varying his bait, worms, bits of bread, even a shiny pebble, but the salmon did not stir. "It's as if it knows my intent," Covan muttered, his brow furrowed, his arms aching from the effort. Defeat loomed, but the memory of the otter's kindness steadied him. "Dorandon, I need you now," he called, his voice ringing over the pool. A swish broke the silence, and the otter's sleek head emerged, its whiskers glistening, its eyes bright with mischief. "What ails you, Covan, son of Gorla?" Dorandon asked, its voice smooth as the river's flow. "What task brings you to my pool?" Covan gestured to the salmon, its silver scales catching the dappled light. "I must catch that salmon under the rock, but it eludes me. Can you bring it to me?" The otter's tail flicked, a simple task for one who knows these waters. It dove, its form a blur in the dark pool, and moments later surfaced, the salmon gripped firmly by its tail, its red gills flashing. Dorandon laid it at Covan's feet, shaking water from its fur. "There, your prize!" Covan's heart soared as he lifted the salmon, its weight reassuring in his hands. "You've my eternal thanks, Dorandon," he said, his voice warm with relief. The otter nodded, slipping back into the pool with a splash, leaving only ripples behind. With the roe, duck and salmon gathered, Covan returned to the cottage, the evening sky ablaze with crimson and gold. The old man stood at the door, his staff tapping the stone floor, the golden-haired maiden at his side, her silver comb glinting in her hair. Covan presented his prizes, laying them gently before the hearth, their colors vivid in the firelight. "The roe, the duck and the salmon as you bade," he said, his voice steady but eager. The old man's eyes softened, a smile curling his lips. "Come, eat and drink," he said, gesturing to a table laden with bread, cheese, and a flagon of sweet mead, the air rich with their aromas. Covan ate heartily, the food restoring his strength, and when his hunger was sated, he met the old man's gaze. "Now, tell me of my kin," he said, his tone firm. The old man leaned forward, his voice low and resonant, like the sea's deep murmur. "You began well, Covan, and so you have fared well. You cherished your mother's blessing, and it has guarded you. You fed the raven when it hungered, kept faith with my charge, and let no vain sights, cock, hen, or dancing staffs, sway you. You saw through the false tales of the youth, who tempted you from your path, and accepted the humble gifts of the poor with gratitude. When difficulties arose, they kindled your courage, not despair." He paused, his eyes searching Covan's face. "As your reward, you shall take your sister, Lyra, home, and I will restore your brothers, Ardan and Ruais, to life. But their idleness and faithlessness bind them to wander forever, never to rest as you will." Covan's heart leapt, but a question burned within him. "First, good sir, tell me your name," he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper in the firelit room. The old man's eyes gleamed, a spark of ancient power within them. "I am the spirit of age," he said, his voice echoing like a tide against the shore. "Go now, Covan, with my blessing, and may wisdom guide you home." Covan bowed, his heart full, the weight of his quest lifted by the promise of reunion. The maiden smiled faintly, her golden hair catching the light, and Covan stepped into the night, the stars above guiding him back to the sea, where his family awaited, their lost ones soon to be restored.